African countries pay 4 times more for borrowing than the United States and 8 times more than the wealthiest European countries. And African countries accounts for just 4% of global greenhouse gas emissions, but it is an epicenter of climate chaos, suffering disproportionately impacts of climate change. And so looking ahead, I saw 2 priorities for action and justice. First, on the economic front. Redesigning today's outdated, dysfunctional and unfair global financial architecture is essential, but I know it won't happen overnight. Yet we can and must take practical action now. The Sustainable Development Goals stimulus I have proposed, an effective debt workout mechanism, and other steps necessary to multiply the resources available for developing countries are vital for sustainable development in Africa and to give options to African governments to support the development of their peoples. We must also drastically step up climate action and climate justice. I have put forward a Climate Solidarity Pact in which developed countries provide financial and technical support to help emerging economies in Africa and beyond to promote an equitable and just transition to renewable energy. And I have presented an acceleration agenda to boost these efforts, with developed countries committing to reach net zero emissions as close as possible to 2040 and developing countries as close as possible to 2050. And developed countries must also finally keep their promises to developing countries by meeting the 100 billion goal, doubling adaptation finance, replenishing the Green Climate Fund, and operationalizing the Loss and Damage Fund this year. And as a matter of justice, Africa must be considered a priority in all these efforts. Excellencies, we will not solve our common challenges in a fragmented way. Together, let us work to advance the power of universal action, the imperative for justice, and the promise of a better future, and I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Secretary General of the United Nations. Your Excellencies, there are almost 65 of us, and this forum has been designed so that everyone should be able to make a statement. I will not be making any commentary in between to ensure that we do conserve time. I similarly would like to request that when we speak, we should remind ourselves of the time limit that we have put aside for each one of us to speak. So I do beg for your indulgence in that regard. My next speaker will be His Excellency Azali Assoumani, President of the Union of Comoros, but also the Chair of the African Union. President Assoumani.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président et chers frères. Monsieur Antonio Guterres, Secrétaire général de l'Organisation des Nations Unies,
representative of the United Nations, dear colleagues, and then head of a government, all protocol observed, I greet you in the name of God. It's an honor for me to take part in this gathering and then to bring the contribution of the African Union to this exchange, to this forum. And I'm hoping that this is going to be very fruitful for the countries that we're representing here. So allow me, before I get into the subject, to extend our thanks, our gratitude to President Ramaphosa, to the South African government and the South African people for the warm welcome that was given to us on our arrival in this country. So we're also expressing our gratitude for all the measures that have been taken to facilitate our meetings and then make our stay here in South Africa most enjoyable. The land of Nelson Mandela, our biggest leader, a figure who's making the continent very proud. So, dear delegates, the African Union that I have the honor to come and represent here this year, 2023, so is giving a very important meaning to work with countries in BRICS. So it considering that as a very most important opportunity for countries to explore together the areas of cooperation that would be beneficial to all of us. And then for that, to see how the bloc can also expand to other African countries, it's a process that will contribute to multiply benefits associated to this cooperation. So various capacity of BRICS in various sectors, it's a very important benefit that will foster the growth and the development of the African continent. So today, Africa is faced with many challenges, especially to the issue of food security, which is something we cannot accept because our continent, which possess 70% of arable land in the world, is registering a deficit every year in the area of food security, ranging up to $200 billion. So BRICS with is a multiform capacity can help the Africa to become independent in the area of food security by putting in place new technologies to improve the sector of agriculture. So Africa is also faced with the issue of industrialization because the continent has got enormous reserves of raw material, but unfortunately they do not have a capacity to exploit and then transform these minerals on our African continent. So the collaboration between BRICS and Africa would allow to develop production units and transformation units in the area of a big program of industrialization that will favor the green transition. Finally, on the pharmaceutical sector, BRICS has got a capacity to develop a partnership with Africa in order to promote research in the pharmaceutical area, but as well encourage the increase of pharmaceutical products. The example of vaccines in South Africa, especially during COVID, that has demonstrated that African countries, not only they've got techniques and necessary technologies, but they also have a capacity to contribute to the world efforts to improve the So I'd like to take this opportunity to reiterate the availability of the African Union in this partnership between BRICS and the African Union. It's a frank partnership that will last longer and win-win. So, ladies and gentlemen, trade relations between Africa and BRICS are multidimensional. So they are illustrated in many advantages that are linked in the South-South Summit. It's important to underline that BRICS represent one of the major trade partners in our continent, and our economic weight constitutes it's something major that cannot be compared with something else in the world. So African countries will wish in the area of this partnership and then funding that will be created by BRICS, such as the new development bank, which the objectives is to fund development project while underlining sustainability. At the moment where our continent is trying to go through some reforms in world financial infrastructure, we are urging BRICS to play a role of a pressure group for those reforms, and also structural reforms and deeper. The world financial architecture are very important to respond to the needs that are not being taken account into the world architecture. With regard to debt, that is putting African countries in trouble. So the African Union has put in place a working group in order to propose means so that to see how to sort out this African debt. So that will be put in place by BRICS to benefit countries in our continent if those funds became operational. In fact, this would allow African countries to access loans with better conditions of repayment, which will be advantageous for countries that are facing prohibitive cost to the world financial market. Beyond all this, so that is linking the two parties. Our continent is the potential to offer to BRICS benefit of opportunities, especially in the area of geopolitics, economics, security, and cultural sector. It's the case of the free trade area that are offering to the countries of BRICS unique opportunities to reinvigorate their effort to foster trade relations with emerging and developing countries. In this regard, the political commitment of Africa in favor of the free trade, the African trade area, as it was last year, the year 2023, as being the year of the acceleration of the implementation. I'm inviting BRICS to be more interested on this instrument, given that from the report from this year, the investment activities and trade of BRICS, they are going to offer important opportunities for the major agricultural sector that is not being exploited in Africa. Furthermore, the access of Africa in G20 that will offer also an opportunity to Africa, a central platform to amplify its position on world economic issues for a more inclusive multilateralism. It will also constitute an opportunity for the continent to work with BRICS in favor of the advent of a world economic governance that is more fair and just. All the actions that we are undertaking in the favor of BRICS and the development cannot last without peace and stability in the world. So I would also like to draw our attention on the agency so that we can seek together means to try and put an end to conflict in Africa, in particular for all extremism, the change of unconstitutional changes that is compromising the peace and stability and prosperity of our continent. So we also need to continue to encourage Russia and Ukraine to put an end to war that is opposing them, given that consequences of this war is not only affecting Europe, but is also affecting the world in general. So, ladies and gentlemen, opportunities given to us today to put together our effort to continue to make this world more just and prosperous by working together in a synergy to build new partnership, frank and then balance based on complementarity and not on a form of dependence. And only with that we can constitute a very important force in the world scene, so that we can deal with challenges that our countries are facing, and then to reach a peace, stability, and economic growth. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Your Excellence, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, President of South Africa. Dear brother, Excellence, Head of State and Government, member and friend of BRICS, Your Excellency, Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of United Nations, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and participants, all protocol observed. Around grace, I say grace to God who has all gathered us in this space in Johannesburg. Allow me to express my deepest gratitude to the government and to the South African people for having invited my government. The theme with the impulsion of Africa at the center of exchange, as well have for the warm welcome to my and my delegation. Excellence, ladies and gentlemen, this summit comes at a particular moment. The world is experiencing an economic crisis, geopolitical and security as well. This summit offers an
supported by there are many friends to think of the collective response with the challenges that we are faced with by putting in place donc, a principle of mutual respect, equality, solidarity, and then openness, and then inclusivity. As opposed to what others can think, I consider that the coalition with BRICS it's a way to fast-track the common project and then to expand the circle of friends and also members. Though this coalition is there to create an order in diversity in order to face world challenges of the moment. Burundi is subscribing to the main conclusions that came out on sectorial meetings aiming in the promotion of a South-South cooperation, the reinforcement of mutual partnership with Africa in a multi-polar world, also in the area of a free trade area. So the enlargement of multilateralism to stimulate the reforms in governance and in world institutions. Excellence and ladies and gentlemen, Burundi is the conviction that its independence can only be effective without a real economic independence. That's the reason why, on the basis of opportunities that Burundi is offering, so we have set ourselves a new vision to make Burundi an emerging country for the horizon 2040 and then a developed country to the 2060 horizon. This vision is opposed on the commitment of the Burundian government to develop and diversify the national economy, and then that is stimulating the production in order to increase exports. To achieve that, Burundi would like to link a new partnership and then reinforce a partnership, and that is mutually beneficial with members and then friends of the BRICS in order to improve our performance. In the mining sector, the Burundi is still not exploited. That the reason it's one of the sector that is promising, on which Burundi is counting to improve its economy. Technology and then manufacturing industry remain big challenges in my country, even though we have a large labor force in the country. I'd like to say the government of Burundi is ready to cooperate with serious partners who would wish to support development efforts and then invest in Burundi. To fast-track socio-economic development in Burundi, we are hoping in fructuous collaboration with the new development bank in order to increase the production of energy, development of infrastructure, digital economy, and then the exploitation of mineral resources. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I came to participate in this summit of BRICS because I strongly believe that it's an opportunity in the world. It's a new chapter in the world, in the history of a world economy, in the manner that it's going to open several opportunities and then a new paradigm. There's a lot to be said in such circumstances, but allow me to mention the significant changes are taking place in the world. So my country is on the side of those who are calling for new reforms of the world governance, in particular in a decision-making institutions such as the United Nations Security Council. So we are hoping that the voice of member and friend of BRICS will be finally heard. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, my country is reaffirming its commitment to play its role in this changing of the new world order, to have a world that is a peaceful, where there's equality and prosperous. So we're also reiterating our thanks to all members of BRICS for the invitation that they've extended to us to come and participate. So we are hoping that the conclusions of these meetings would be beneficial for BRICS and then also the world. I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Su Excelencia Cyril Ramaphosa,
We also greatly appreciate the fact that this meeting is taking place in Africa, the cradle of a part of our ancestors, which fundamentally nourishes the very essence of the Cuban identity. Our satisfaction is even greater because it brings us to South Africa, a country with which we are united by historic ties or of brotherhood. Nearly 400,000 compatriots contributed to the struggle against apartheid in African lands. 2,289 of our internationalist combatants fell heroically, writing with their sacrifice one of the most beautiful pages in the history of solidarity among people. In Sister Angola, we have quoted a well-known African proverb that today we would like to recall. The footprints of those who walk together can never be erased. In the case of South Africa and Cuba, those footprints are as solid and indelible as the memory of the historic leaders of our nations. We can never forge the embrace of Nelson Mandela and Fidel Castro, as they met here and demanded each other's reunion, as only happens between very dear brothers. I attend this dialogue with the enormous responsibility that it represents for Cuba to chair the group of 7-7 and China, the largest and most diverse grouping of developing nations. We are 134 countries, 2/3 of the members of the UN, where almost 80% of the planet's population lives, facing the colossal challenges of an incredibly unequal world, where exclusion and poverty have multiplied after 2 years of pandemics, followed by dramatic conflicts. In the last 10 years, the nations of the South have seen their foreign debt already more than pay off double. Unilateral coercive measures are on the rise. More than 3 billion people are affected by the degradation of ecosystems. More than 1 million species of plants and animals are in danger of extinction, according to the Secretary General's message of World's Environment Day. If we don't act immediately, we will give our children and grandchildren a planet not only unrecognizable to those of us from the previous centuries, but sadly doomed to become uninhabitable, impossible to habitate. 7 years away from the deadline set for the fulfillment of the Sustainable Development Goals of the 2030 Agenda, the outlook is discouraging. Half of the 169 agreed targets are far or very far from being met. More than 30% of them have not experienced any progress, or even worse, show setbacks compared to 2015, according to the most recent United Nations report. The developed countries of the West and the large transnationals have designed an international order that does not take into account to all the progress of our nations of the South, and it is only effective for meager minorities. The G77 and the BRICS have the responsibility and the possibility to act to change this unjust world order. It is not an option, it is the only alternative. Today, no one can question the growing authority of BRICS. That's why we do not hesitate to welcome its eventual enlargement, which will contribute to strengthen its relevance and representativeness. It has been a historical demand of the G77, as it is also of BRICS, to undertake a real transformation of the deeply unjust, anachronistic, and dysfunctional international finance architecture. We firmly believe that the new development bank created by BRICS can and must become an alternative to the current financial institutions, which for almost a century have applied draconian recipes to profit from the reserves of the South and reproduce their schemes of subjugation and domination. We especially welcome the appointment of our dear Dilma Rousseff and head of his entity, and the praiseworthy initiative of BRICS to create a broad-based foreign currency reserve mechanism to guarantee certainty and stability to the South. The extension of these mechanisms to other countries will certainly help to alleviate the imbalances of the current monetary system. The establishment of mutual credit lines in local currencies by the Bank of BRICS countries and the possibility of creating a single currency for their operations were also initiatives that could be applied in relation with other developing countries to reduce the abusive monopoly of the U.S. currency, which reinforces and guarantees equal harmful to the rest of the world. The BRICS countries are world leaders in agricultural production, concentrating about 1/3 of the food produced globally. Their joint action with the rest of the developing countries will be a substantial contribution to the elimination of the hunger, which today affects more than 700 million people in the world. On climate change, we emphasize the strategic value of effective coordination between the BRICS and G77 to safeguard the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities in the implementation of the Framework Convention and the Paris Agreement. At COP28, which will take place this year in Dubai, for the first time, a G77 Leaders Summit will be held, convened by Cuba to strengthen strategic coordination. Scientific and technical development is today monopolized by a club of countries that monopolize most of the patents, technologies, research centers, and promote the drain of talent from our countries. The G77 and BRICS must and can do more to change that situation, and in that spirit, Cuba has convened a summit of heads of state and government of the Group of 77 and China on science, technology, and innovation as a premise for development, to be held on September 15th in Havana. We welcome you there. To move forward to a more just and sustainable future, the time for collective action is not tomorrow, it is now. We firmly believe in the power of unity and diversity, and that it is time to act together in defense of historical grievances that, because they have not been addressed in time, have multiplied the problems facing our nations today. And since we are in the rainbow nations, which has overcome the hatred of the past, integrating its rich diversity of cultures, languages, and religious beliefs, let us assume all the precepts of the wise African humanist philosophy of Ubuntu, the ethics of caring for others, which in the face of selfishness and individualisms promotes a form of life of solidarity, fraternity, and respect in which no one is left behind. The G77 and the BRICS have the opportunity to generate a historic transformation for the sake of the future generations. Let's do so. Thank you very much.
President Canal, I now have the honor to call upon His Excellency Ismail Omar Guelleh, the President of the Republic of Djibouti and Chair of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD.
Thank you, Chair. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa, President of the Republic of South Africa, Excellencies, heads of states and governments, distinguished guests, leaders and guests. Firstly, I would like to express my appreciations to His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa, the President of the Republic of South Africa, and the people of South Africa for their warm welcome and hospitality during our visit to this beautiful country. On behalf of all members of IGAD, as well as myself, I would like to extend my gratitude to you, Mr. Chairman, for inviting me to attend this 15th BRICS Summit held in Africa under African chairmanship with a focus on our continent. The partnerships between BRICS and Africa goes beyond convenience. It is a strategic imperative. Together, we have the power to reshape the landscape, promote inclusive growth, and eradicate poverty. By joining forces, we can create a world where no nation is left behind, where prosperity is shared equally, and where sustainable development becomes reality. Africa possesses resources, and when combined with the technological capabilities and investment potential of BRICS, it opens up unparalleled opportunities for both regions. By allocating resources to infrastructure, energy, agriculture, and manufacturing sectors, we can generate employment opportunities, enhance productivity, and uplift millions from poverty. This is a moment to seize in order to establish connections, promote trade activities, and enable technology transfer that will ensure Africa's emergence as a global economic powerhouse. Djibouti stands as a committed partner and ally to BRICS nations. We are also supporters of the African Union-led efforts toward economic integration through the implementation of the African Comprehensive Free Trade Agreement. It is a step that places Africa in its rightful position within the global order. We appreciate your efforts to advance and strengthen the partnership between BRICS and the continent. In summits, we have already identified key areas of focus that contribute to a mutually beneficial partnership. Your leadership in enhancing the relationship between BRICS and Africa serves as a motivation for us to make substantial contributions towards our shared goals and interests. Dear Chairman, I eagerly commend the BRICS partnership for creating a platform that offers an opportunity to diversify the expand the global economic landscape. Undoubtedly, BRICS is a force with politically and economically. It is a success story evident from the growing number of countries aspiring to join this group, as well as the commendable performance of the new Development Bank with its extensive portfolio of projects aimed at maximizing development impact. I am delighted to announce that IGAD fully aligns with and supports the priorities outlined by the BRICS Chair for 2023. Specifically, Africa and IGAD aim to mobilize investment in order to develop infrastructure that connects parts of
the world today. We recall the Bandung Conference of 1955, when Asian and African nations demanded a greater voice for the developing countries in world affairs. The conference called for the recognition of the equality of all nations, both large and small. We still share that common vision of a fair and a just world. We still seek to overcome polarity and division. We want a world without barriers between North, South, East, and West. We still seek a world in which we work together, underpinned by mutual respect. Through the 15th BRICS Summit and this dialogue, we should strive to advance the Bandung spirit of unity, friendship, and cooperation. In South Africa, we have a word that we use to describe friendship, cooperation, and we call that Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a practice based on the understanding that our success, our prosperity, and well-being depends on the success, prosperity, and well-being of others. That is why we also use another South African term about our identities, whilst respecting the identities of others. We often say, I am because you are. And that is a recognition, and that is the respect that we want to accord to one another. We see the BRICS partnership as a catalyst for global growth and development and response to the needs of all nations. It is the right of Africa and the entire global South to fully reap the benefits of global trade and investment. Without trade and investment, our economies cannot thrive and our people's material conditions cannot improve. As the African continent, we are determined that the continent's substantial resources are harnessed for the benefit as well as for the development of the people of Africa. The African Continental Free Trade Area, once fully operational, will unlock the benefits of the continental market and generate substantial opportunities for African countries, but also for other countries. To make use of these opportunities, Africa is looking to BRICS partnership to unlock infrastructure and development financing. This was part of the founding vision of the new development bank. This bank is playing a leading role in efforts to increase the resilience of the global South and to bring fairness to the global trading system, the financial system, and to strengthen BRICS currencies. We have to reform global economic, financial, and political, as well as the multilateral trading system, so that we can create a conducive environment for fair trade. While many countries of the global South are seeking significant progress in industrialization, in technological development, in innovation, and the digital economy, they are not fully reaping the economic benefits of their efforts. By working together, by sharing skills and capabilities, by mobilizing resources, we will be able to give renewed impetus to the global growth and sustainable development. We need to move beyond expressions of solidarity towards inclusion, mutually beneficial economic cooperation as well. We trust that this dialogue that is being attended by some 65 countries will provide leadership, vision, and hope as we strive together for a better Africa and for a better world. It is for this reason that I welcome you all warmly, and I welcome you all on behalf of the BRICS leaders who have just issued their declaration, which outlines a number of important aspects. The BRICS leaders have also taken a decision to expand the BRICS membership, and that announcement having been made, we welcome those new members, but at the same time, that is the first phase, and other phases will follow, and we welcome various other countries in the partnership of the BRICS countries. So thank you very much, and thank you for being here. I thank you. Having done that, I now would like to invite President Lula da Silva, the President of the Republic of Brazil, to take the floor.
Obrigado, Presidente Ramaphosa. Obrigado, companheiros presidentes dos países que compõem os BRICS. Eu gostaria de cumprimentar o presidente Ramaphosa por dedicar este debate à parceria dos BRICS com o Sul Global, em especial com a África. É hora de revitalizar a cooperação entre os países em desenvolvimento. Vemos hoje o surgimento de novos desafios que se somam aos problemas de longa data. Fomos atingidos por uma pandemia por novos conflitos e por uma grave emergência climática, no momento em que trabalhávamos pela implementação dos Objetivos de Desenvolvimento Sustentável. Quando adotada a Agenda 2030, traçava rota para um futuro melhor. Hoje, metade das metas está atrasada e houve estagnação ou retrocesso em quase um terço das metas. A insegurança alimentar regrediu para os patamares de 2005. A democracia, em vários lugares, se vê ameaçada pelo extremismo ou corroída pela xenofobia. Estamos, mais uma vez na história, sob o risco de uma guerra nuclear. O mundo andou para trás. Muitas das respostas que buscamos para construir um mundo mais equitativo estão na África. A Covid-19 ceifou milhões de vidas, mas apesar dos obstáculos injustificáveis ao acesso a vacinas, a África apresentou taxas de mortalidade muito baixas. Enquanto preocupações de segurança limitam cada vez mais o compartilhamento de tecnologias, a União Africana lança estratégias de transformação digital e centenas de startups e centros de inovação surgem na África. Ao mesmo tempo em que proliferam medidas unilaterais que ameaçam a integridade do regime comercial, o continente africano se transforma na maior área de livre comércio do planeta, com 1 bilhão e 300 milhões de pessoas e um PIB combinado de 3 trilhões e 400 bilhões de dólares. À medida que órgãos multilaterais falham ao responder às ameaças à paz, a União Africana assume crescente protagonismo na resolução de conflitos. De um lado, alianças excludentes renascem e acirram tensões, e de outro, países africanos e latino-americanos se unem para preservar a zona de paz e a cooperação Atlântico-Sul. Mas assim, como em outras regiões na África, também ficam evidentes os grandes constrangimentos impostos a países em desenvolvimento. As promessas da globalização não se cumpriram. Muitas nações se veem hoje tolhidas por dívidas impagáveis. Nos últimos anos, o volume de recursos direcionados a países do sul global, via comércio e investimentos, vem diminuindo. A maior parte do mundo em desenvolvimento depende da exportação de commodities, cuja demanda é volátil, e da importação de
goods importments of first needs are very difficult because the prices went up. At the same time, financial institutions impose high interest rates and conditionalities that narrow the action space of the state. It is impossible to promote sustainable development if the national budget or the public budget is consumed by the foreign debt service. To fight the climate change offers us an opportunity to rethink financing models, trade, and development. The energy transition cannot bring back again the exploitation relationship of the colonial past. We need solutions that diversify and add value to the production of the developing countries. The most evident signal that the planet is becoming a place with more inequality is the growth of hunger and poverty. And this is unacceptable. Although its magnitude, these problems are not treated with the urgency that they deserve. The emissions of the 1% richest part of the world population are 100 times higher than the 50% poorest. As the Kenyan environmentalist Wangari Maathai, winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, we quote, "We would like to put the blame on the poor for the destruction of the environment, but frequently the powerful ones, including the governments, are the true responsible. End of quote. We have sustainable forms to enhance the agricultural output, create income, and offer social protection. And this was what we discussed in the Amazon Summit meeting in the city of Belém in Brazil, in the Amazon region. And this is what we want to discuss with the other countries that have tropical basins like Congo and the Borno-Mekong. Brazil will take over the chair of the G20 in December, and we want to put back the inequality reduction as the core of the international agenda, to reduce inequalities. We cannot do that without greater representation from Africa. So that's why we advocate the entrance of the African Union as member of the G20. Now, with my trip to South Africa, and then I will follow to Angola and to São Tomé and Príncipe, I intend to open a new cooperation agenda between Brazil and Africa. Let's go back to our universal vocation and rebuild our historical ties with the developing countries. Prosperity is only full when it is shared. The presence here of dozens of leaders from the global south shows that the world is much more complex than the mindset that came from the World War, the Cold War, that some wants to reinstall. And instead of following the rationale of competition that imposes automatic alignments and that will foster mistrust, we have to strengthen our collaboration within the global south. The world with welfare and well-being for all is only possible if we have an international order that will be more inclusive and more solidarity. Thank you very much.
Your Excellencies, heads of state and government, colleagues, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I would like to express my gratitude for the South African chairship for the arrangement of this representative summit of the BRICS Plus outreach. This format of communication is of utmost importance. It offers us a great opportunity to discuss in substance the relevant topics of mutual interest with those countries who largely share the attitudes of the five with the like-minded states. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you, dear friends. We all stand for the building of a new multipolar world order, a one that is truly balanced and takes into account the sovereign interests of as many nations as possible, and opens possibilities for implementation of various development models, while making it possible to preserve national cultures and identities and traditions. Let me stress, BRICS is not competing with anyone and is not opposing itself to anyone. But it's also obvious that this objective process, the process of emerging of a new world order, still has fierce opponents who try to slow down this process, to contain the emergence of new independent centers of development in the world. The countries of the so-called Golden Billion are doing everything in order to preserve the previous unipolar world order. They are comfortable with it. It benefits them. They try to substitute the world order by the rules-based order, although no one has seen these rules. And they use these rules for their narrow interests, and they adjust them to fit their political interests at any time in accordance with the interests of certain states. In effect, it is the same colonialism in a new package. By the way, it doesn't look so good. and modern-day colonizators, under the guise of benign mottos of human rights and so on, try to resolve their problems at someone else's extent by pumping out resources of other countries. The president of Brazil mentioned the debt burden of developing countries. Well, of course, on the one hand, they pump out huge volumes of resources, and on the other hand, they create a sort of credit relations that paying these loans off is almost impossible, and it looks not like loans, but as contributions. The world order is threatened by the radical neoliberalism imposed by some countries that is aimed at eliminating traditional values that matter for all of us. I'm talking about the value of family, respect for national and religious traditions. They try to do so to serve their own interests, and some countries even justify extremism, xenophobia, and connive with terrorists. The global majority, represented by countries present here, is getting increasingly tired of all sorts of pressure or manipulations. But it is ready for equal and mutually respectful cooperation. That is the attitude taken by the BRICS countries. That's how we treat the development of multifaceted relations with many countries present here and other interested countries on the regional and global basis, including such regional structures as CIS, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Caribbean countries, the Gulf countries. Bearing in mind that most African countries participate in today's event, today BRICS focus is on Africa. And we in Russia can only welcome it. We believe it is right, especially so as it is the Republic of South Africa that holds the chairship. Many dear friends, we met with many of you quite recently in St. Petersburg at the second Russia-Africa summit, where we held constructive discussions. In St. Petersburg, we reaffirmed that Russia and Africa have ever stronger friendly ties and mutually beneficial relations. The foundation for these relations was laid in the times when the African continent was struggling for its independence. We value that African countries have a friendly attitude to the Russian country, and in its turn, Russia is interested in further deepening its multifaceted ties with the African continent. We will actively promote these ties, translate them in practical cooperation in various fields. Our particular focus lies on providing African countries and the world market with grain and fertilizers. We have all opportunities to make our contribution to the global efforts to resolve the hunger problem and not to allow the food crisis. So we can only welcome that for the second year in a row we have record crop yields. And as I already mentioned, in the coming months, as a priority assistance project, we'll allocate 25 to 50 tons of grain to African countries, and we'll ship it free of charge. That's what we mentioned in St. Petersburg. Right now we are concluding negotiations with our African countries on these issues. We are doing so despite the obstacles created by others, in particular illegitimate sanctions imposed against our exports that complicate insurance and settlement processes. Our African friends can rest assured that Russia will always remain a reliable food supply and will continue to support the countries most in need. Russia takes a responsible attitude to its obligations in terms of energy exports. Largely, these exports are oriented on the emerging markets. Russian raw materials and fuels make it possible for the friendly countries, including African countries, to contain price rises and enhance agricultural and industrial production, thus strengthening their energy security and economic resilience. According to some estimates, by 2050, world's population will rise by 1.7 billion people, and the energy supply will raise by 22%. So it's obvious that for the foreseeable future, there is no alternative to coal or hydrocarbons, meaning that the energy transition that is necessary, the energy transition to low-emission economy, should take place in a gradual and balanced manner. It should be well calculated, taking into account national peculiarities and possibilities of the respective countries. By the way, some countries are already facing the effects of the efforts of the mistakes they committed when planning this energy transition, and problem is exacerbating. We see a solution in effective use of all energy resources while implementing clean technologies, and obviously, together with our BRICS partners, we stand for strengthening the equal and technological cooperation in such fields as the use of renewable energy sources and in other important areas, including development of new types of atomic reactors, promotion of hydrogen technologies, and so on. By the way, in these fields, Africa is our priority partner. Currently, in different fields, we are working on about 30 projects with participation of Russia. In 16 states, we are operating in a very active manner. In Egypt, for example, Rosatom is working on construction of Daba, a nuclear power plant, and the total capacity of our energy projects amounts to